Hey, we are live on a Wednesday. It's another SnL show. My name is Lane.
And my name is Scott. Welcome to our show.
All right. So we love bringing relevant topics. And this is a question that we actually hear occasionally. Maybe we're hearing it more so as possibly forbearances. I know they just extended it, but maybe they come due. But let's get into it. We're getting the question because of how crazy prices are getting. You know, one, are we in a bubble? Two, are we headed into a foreclosure crisis? I mean, the operative word there is foreclosure. So the question at the hand is, are we heading towards a foreclosure crisis?
And what would be the definition of a foreclosure crisis? Is it a certain percentage of homes that are forced into foreclosure and therefore have to sell?
When you think of foreclosure crisis, you think of 2008 to 2009-ish, when like a lot of bank-owned properties were getting put up, and the banks were taking a bunch of homes because homeowners weren't able to make their payments. So yeah, I don't have the exact percentage, but let's just assume that a lot of people are either walking away from their homes or short selling their homes, or the houses are being foreclosed upon because of missed payments. Like, are we going to see this influx, this spike in foreclosures? Cool.
Got it.
All right. So the next banner that we got to put up the banner, Stipe. Let's talk about forbearances. So the reason why I think this question is being asked is, are we heading into a foreclosure crisis? Because a lot of homes were put into forbearance. So the stat that we have here, thanks to Keeping Current Matters, is one, almost 50% of homes have left forbearance already, and they've already caught up on payments. So I'm assuming the ones that are still in forbearance are the ones that need help the most, but the ones that have left, 50% are already caught up. And then according to the Mortgage Bankers Association, the MBA, data through March 28th, almost 50% of homeowners who have already left the program were current on their mortgage payments when they exited. 26.6% made their monthly payments during the forbearance period. 14.7% brought past due payments current, and 7.6% actually paid their loan off in full. So let's bring Scott back up. But what does this tell us, Scott? Like, if you had to think, like, homes are, people are taking their homes out of forbearance and they're becoming current, a lot of them.
Well, what it tells me, Lane, is that these people have equity in their homes. It's an asset that they believe in, that they have money in the bank, so to speak, sitting in their home. So these are folks that were scared. They had lost some wages. They needed some help with the forbearance, which was basically a forestalling of making your payments. But it by no means indicated that they were stepping near a foreclosure. And again, a foreclosure is, generally speaking, when a homeowner is underwater, their house is worth less than what they owe on the property. So they owe more on the property and they need to walk away. These people in forbearances just weren't sure what was going on, and they needed a hand up during uncertain times to make the payment. I believe in most cases, and the stats will bear that out, the underlying equity was there. So they had every intention to get caught up and not go into a foreclosure situation and walk away with money on the table.
Yeah, I think a lot of homeowners do have plenty of equity these days. Like, I think that's one of the higher levels of all time. I think they said the average equity of a homeowner is over 200,000. I know we're going to touch base on that a little bit later, but like, there's a lot of equity for these particular homeowners. But just because you have equity in the home, I understand we're going to get to that topic in a little bit later, but just because you have equity in the home doesn't necessarily mean that the bank can't foreclose on your home. I would imagine because you have equity, if you missed a couple payments, you're going to preemptively, before the foreclosure process begins, you're going to sell your home and walk away with maybe some money because of the positive equity. But you could still technically be foreclosed upon with equity in the home. But let's go to number two. We're going to talk about banks. Okay, so number two on the banks, it says the banks don't want houses back. Right. So they learned from the 2008 when they took on all of these foreclosures and all these inventory of foreclosed homes, that they're trying to do what they can now. They're trying to get ahead of it now because they don't want that influx of inventory on their books and having to deal with all these foreclosures.
Well, that's a great point. The banks are not in the business of holding homes. That's not what they want to do. That's not their first choice. They'll do anything they can to not hold properties. We do know that as a fact. So there's going to be programs in place to avoid them having to take back homes. These are short sales, other vehicles in play to alleviate the chance that banks are going to have to take property back. They don't want to be in the business of owning homes.
Yeah, and about 50% of all mortgages, they're backed by the Federal Housing Finance Agency. And one of the things that we wanted to bring up as well is at the time of 2008, 2009, when people were having to walk away from homes, as Scott mentioned, there weren't any loan options. There weren't any really short sale options or loan modification options present at the time. And that's why it got really bad. It wasn't until after things got really bad that these things started to develop.
Mm-hmm.
So now the banks have these options in place, and they've had them for a while. And so what's really interesting is in 2008, the FHFA, which is the Federal Housing Finance Agency, offered 208,000 homeowners some form of retention action plan, some sort of modification, some sort of option. Well, over the past year, they offered that same protection to over 1 million homeowners. So obviously, we're not even in a crisis right now, and they're offering these options because they're trying to get ahead of it, right? So I think it's interesting to know that there weren't options available then, and that's why it got really messy. There's options available and still available today, and a lot of people are taking advantage of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They've learned from the past, and they're trying, as Lane says, trying to get ahead of the game and create many, many options.
Yeah, here's some percentages for you, Scott. 35.5% have worked out a repayment plan with their lender. 26.5% were granted a loan deferral where a borrower does not have to pay their lender interest or principal on a loan for an agreed upon period of time. And then 9% were given a flat out loan modification. So those are interesting stats there.
Absolutely.
Moving on to the next one, homeowners with options. So this goes back to the equity, right? So now there's like, if you feel like you aren't going to be able to afford the payment, maybe because of the pandemic, you might have lost a job, your income levels have changed, and now you just can't afford your current lifestyle, your current mortgage payment, but you have equity in the home. So maybe there's options you can sell before the foreclosure process is started. So that's one of the things that we were talking about. So homeowners have more options than ever before. And it goes back to the thing that I mentioned earlier. Currently, let's see, Core Logic said the average equity of mortgage homes is equity of mortgage homes is currently 204,000. That's the average nationwide. And, we're always a little bit higher than the average here in Southern California, specifically Orange County. So I would have to imagine that number is even higher in Orange County here.
I would have to agree. And we have to remember, too, that the equity is created two ways. It's created by paying down your mortgage, but it's also created by market appreciation. And we've seen homes actually go up in the last 13 months since the shutdown. So even if folks are having a little hard time making the actual payments, their equity stake in their home has grown by exponential numbers in many, many of the markets. So they're sitting on equity more than they thought they would have had even a year ago when things were looking pretty good at that point anyway.
Yeah. So another stat provided to us by Black Knight, just 1 in 10 homeowners, Scott, that are in forbearance have less than 10% equity in their home. So that is an indication that, more than 90% of homeowners have more than 90% have more than 10% equity. So exactly. More than 90% homeowners have more than 10% equity. So there's a lot of equity still out there, even if your home's in forbearance. So that gives homeowners a lot of options. One of the things that I wanted to add too, we didn't really put a banner up there for this one, but from a political standpoint, I'm learning a lot of articles, Scott, that are stating that this particular administration, they don't want to see a crisis during their administration. They're going to do what they can to stimulate the economy by keeping interest rates low, or they're holding on to something that they haven't implemented yet. They were talking about implementing that, but because of inventory so tight right now and home prices are going so high, they're holding on to a $15,000 first-time home buyer credit. And so my feeling is if they sense at all that things are slowing down or that there could be a potential crisis looming, that they just help stimulate things a little bit, that they're going to put plans out like that. And they're going to try to do whatever they can to not have a crisis during their administration.
I think you're absolutely right. There's plans in place. The government is acting proactively or putting themselves in a proactive position to jump, if need be, to keep things moving, to keep incentives going so that we do not end up in a crisis situation.
Yeah. So what do you think? Are we heading into a foreclosure crisis based on some of the stats and what you're seeing out there?
I think what we do is we put stats in. We put the stats in the bag. We put our boots on the ground experience in the bag. What we're dealing with right now. We put our experience for the last 3 decades with the ups and downs and the different crises that we've had. My vote is that we're not in for a crisis foreclosure situation. I don't see it happening, at least in the markets that we serve here, Coastal Orange County, Southern California. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I feel like there's a difference between a price pullback and a foreclosure crisis. I don't see it happening either on a foreclosure crisis. We talked about this a little bit last week too, Scott. Like a lot of families are blending together and buying larger homes, or with the new rules on ADUs or the casitas. Like all of a sudden now there's multi-generational families living together, so that's multiple incomes living together. So even if the prices do pull back a little bit, but because people have so much equity in their homes these days, they're not really going to have to walk away, and it's not going to cause this foreclosure crisis. One quote I do want to read that I think you really like comes from Zelman and Associates. Okay. And it comes from Ivy Zelman, and Ivy basically has 30 years of experience covering different housing and related industries. And Ivy says, the likelihood of us having a foreclosure crisis again is about 0%. So maybe that helps answer our question right there.
Well, that's pretty bullish, I would say, for sure. And again, given everything that we've talked about, everything that we know from the banks, from the amounts of equity that people are holding, even as we see the homes that are being purchased today, influxes of cash buyers, high down payments exceeding 50% loan to value. I've never seen a larger percentage of those types of purchases in my 33-year career. And I think, Lane, you would echo that. We're just seeing huge percentages of large cash down payment purchases. And again, part of that's blended families, generations going in together to buy a home. So moving forward, the way the purchases are happening, we're seeing, instant equity and lots of it.
Yeah, instant equity. But then even the ones that are putting less than 20% down doesn't mean they don't have it either. What we've been noticing are the ones that are putting 5, 10, maybe 15% down. They're doing that on purpose because they were taking advantage of the low rates, and they would rather finance more of it and keep cash on hand because the value of $1 today is worth more than the value of $1 tomorrow. So like they're just based on that principle, they're taking advantage of rates that were in the twos.
No, you're absolutely right. People are leveraging. They're leveraging, and they're listening to their tax advisors, their accountants, and so forth. And they're saying the cost of money is so cheap, I should reserve as much as I can and leverage into the payment that I can afford. So Lane's got a great point there in that we don't want to think just because we see some low down payment, high loan to value loans, that these are risky situations. Many of these buyers have considerable more money sitting in the bank on the sidelines that could be infused into the home if needed. They're just using it for other reasons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's about it. So we just wanted to touch base because we are getting these questions. We get the bubble question. We get, are we heading into a foreclosure crisis question? We get these questions quite often, and we want to make sure that we address them here and live. So we want to hear from you too. What do you think? What are you hearing? Are you hearing different? And if so, what are you hearing? Like, we love having these conversations. Leave it in the comments. If we said something today that you think somebody else would find value, share that with them. The best love and support you can give us is a like or a comment on our page, or even pushing that share button. So we love doing this every week. We're going to come back at the same time, same place next Wednesday for another SnL show.
And always bring your comments, your questions. Give us ideas of what you'd like to hear us talk about, and we'll do the research and be ready to go.
Bye for now.
See ya.